going to the gym is pointless when you can't hold a microphone to your hand for half an hour without really struggling. So I can lift some weights in a gym for half an hour, not so much. Right. Firstly, before I start, it will be turned down. Julian knows what he's doing. It'll take a moment. Today is the last opportunity for you to give physically to the New Day offering. You may still yet to give by bank transfer if that's how you would prefer to give, but we're not going to do another physical offering for New Day next week. So there are baskets here. There are gift aid declarations, the church's bank details if you need them, in order to allow you to give in support of sending the youth as a whole church to New Day. So please do that if you would like to. Also, a little bit of pre-warning. I've got a list of four things today, and in my notes, they are in one. Do you want this list to go from light-hearted to heavy or from heavy to light-hearted? Which way around would you prefer it? Heavy to light-hearted. Okay, let me just readjust my notes. Right, so reason 1 is going to go last. Reason 2, second to last. Reason 3, third. And reason 4, fourth. Okay. This sermon will now be more to your liking. We are continuing in the Gospel of John this morning. Last week, John spoke on the raising of Lazarus from the dead, ruling Jewish authorities. And in a section that John didn't read, nor am I going to read, we learn that from that day on, from the day that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, they made plans to put Jesus to death. And we see as well that their motivations were self-serving. They didn't want Jesus to carry on living and performing signs and teaching because they feared, and this is a quote from John, everyone would believe in him and the Romans would come and take their place and their nation. And so we're entering a different phase in the Gospel of John. We're entering the Passion of Jesus, those events in the week running up to his crucifixion and his resurrection. And today's passage, at least in John's Gospel, covers the last interaction between Jesus and his disciples before entering that final week of his pre-resurrection ministry. And we will look at Jesus, but like I did when we looked at Nicodemus, actually I'm going to look at Mary today, and we're going to hold Mary up as a mirror to us and allow her actions to provoke us. And actually, I think that's what Jesus does with this as well anyway. So if you'd like to turn with me or to read from the screen, I'm going to read John chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. So John chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume, but Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was actually about to betray him, said, Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. As I read and reread the passage, finishing where John finished last week, and knowing I could have gone anywhere, I could have gone to the triumphal entry, I kept getting stuck here in these few verses. I kept getting stuck at Mary's action and at Jesus's kind of commending of it. I think this is a really key event in the Gospels, and there are two reasons why I think this is a key event. Firstly, this event is reported in numerous Gospels. This event is reported in Matthew and in Mark, and here we are today reading it in John. There are more similarities between Matthew and Mark's recounting of the event, but it's not in question that we are looking at the same event in John now as is recounted in Matthew and Mark. In Matthew and Mark, whose house it was Simon the leper's house that this happened in, that is mentioned. In Matthew and Mark, the woman who did this isn't mentioned, but she is mentioned in John. We learn that it's Mary. In John's Gospel, this happens before the triumphal entry, but in Matthew and Mark's Gospel, this happens after the triumphal entry, and I couldn't follow the commentary well enough to try and tell you why that's okay. The second reason I think this is one of the key events in Jesus' life and ministry is because of what Jesus says about it. In Matthew and Mark, more explicitly, Jesus says, "Truly, I tell you, whenever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." So Jesus is highlighting this event as something that it stands out. Jesus didn't say that sort of thing often. The Gospels didn't say that sort of thing often about events. You know, they just happened, and we're going, wow, this is amazing. But only very rarely did Jesus go, remember this. This is really important. And this is one of those times where Jesus says, truly I tell you, what she's done will be remembered forever. So, we do know that that Mary is unknowingly anointing Jesus' body for burial. We do know that. However, what I want to look at is Mary's example. Mary's example. It's worth mentioning that a similar event, but not the same event, happens in Luke's Gospel as well. And again, a woman breaks an expensive flask of perfume, pours it on his feet, and she cleans his feet with her hair and her tears. So although they're not the same event, I'm going to kind of go, actually, it kind of establishes this is a worthwhile way of worshipping Jesus. And I've called today's sermon Warning PDA. Now, if you are as old as I am, I'm old enough that I knew it was a term, but I didn't really, it's not a term I use, but I'm using it today because we have younger people in the room, and here we go. So it means public display of affection. Public display of affection, PDA. All right? So, warning, PDA. Today's sermon is a touchy-feely sermon. I'm not going to apologize for it because Jesus said that we will remember what she did forever. Right. So I kept thinking as I read this just how awkward this is. How awkward this event would have been. How if this was to happen today, all of us would be trying to squirm our way out of this room and out of this thing as quickly as we could. We're not very good at public displays of affection. We reserve them for special moments, don't we? Like weddings and funerals, or perhaps football matches. If England win tonight, no one will have to guess how I feel about the English football team. No one will have to guess. It will be clear. There will be an extravagant public display of affection. But in my life, do you know, I'm not big on public displays of affection. Cheryl and I are not big on public displays of affection. I stupidly call it a smooch. I occasionally go in for a smooch in public, and it makes my kids cringe. And I can see Izzy cringing now. I'll go, go on, darling, give us a smooch. And the kids cringe. But you know, just a few weeks ago, I can't remember where we were, but as we looked around in the place that we were at, it was beautiful, and you know, maybe it was sunset or something. I really can't remember where we were. But Izzy turned to me and Sharon and was like, "You two need to have a smooch here." You know, like there was something in Izzy. She recognized, actually, this place, this setting, you've got to have a kiss. Like this, a kiss would just perfect this moment. You've got to have a kiss. And so we did. And just as Izzy knew that it was totally appropriate that Cheryl and I had a smooch then, Mary knew she couldn't not do this public display of affection. She had to. Jesus was so worthy of this, and she couldn't not. So as costly as it was for her, in the expense of the perfume that was poured out, as costly as it was for her in how much she had to humble herself to do this in front of everybody, an act which Jesus in just a few chapters' time is going to do himself to his disciples, she couldn't not. She absolutely had to. So I've got a list of 4 reasons, which won't be exhaustive, of why we might struggle with public displays of affection. None of them may be true of you. All of them may be true of you. I want to make it clear as well, my intention this morning isn't to lay a weight on you. Okay, my hope this morning is to persuade you that you can be bold and unafraid in this space and in your lives to unashamedly and just extravagantly display your affections for God, and that's good for you and it's good for all of us. So, 4 reasons, and you have changed the order of these. So we're starting heavy and we're getting light, okay? So, this is the heaviest of the 4 reasons that I think we may struggle with public displays of affection for Jesus. You might actually just not have much affection for Jesus. I wish that weren't true, but we know that it's possible, don't we? The Bible talks about lukewarmness. It's not a good thing, but we know it can happen. And as I say, it isn't the same event, but in Luke's gospel, where the woman who breaks the perfume and anoints Jesus' feet and wipes them with her hair and her tears, the gospel records that she loved much because she's been forgiven much. She loves much because she's been forgiven much. I wonder if we are ever just cold in our affections because we've forgotten how blessed we are, that the sin that separated us from God has been completely removed so that we can enjoy relationship with our Heavenly Father, and so that we can live the righteous life that he calls us to, that we are powerless to live without him. We can become cold in our affections towards him when we're not conscious of our need for him, when we forget that he is the vine, we're the branches, and that apart from him, we can literally do nothing. I've already talked about Cheryl and I smooching. If you are married, you know how easy it is to slip into this, how easy it is to take your spouse for granted and for your affections to not be warm. Reason 2. So we're getting lighter. You may be suffering from depression. I'm going to try and tread carefully here, because if anyone is or has ever experienced depression, the way you experience it is likely very different. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my experience of suffering from depression. As you know, coming out of the pandemic, I think I talked about it every now and then at the time, I found the challenges of leading in the pandemic difficult, and the social isolation of leading in the pandemic difficult, and that led to me, for the first time in my life ever, feeling depressed. As you all know, I'm a very emotional person. Even just 2 weeks ago, I was holding back tears speaking to you all. I'm a very emotional person. But when I was depressed, I just felt numb. This is how I experienced it. I was so numb that I felt nothing. And if ever I felt something, I didn't even trust that I was feeling it. I just thought that I was having a moment where I was conscious of how I might feel if I felt feelings. I just felt numb, and I absolutely hated it. I would have given anything to be moved to tears at that time. That may be a reason that you struggle to show affection for God. Doesn't mean you don't love him, it just means that there is something that is kind of in the way of you expressing those feelings. We've talked about this a lot for the last year or so. You know, this picture of an Adullam's cave where the depressed can come to find hope and healing. Do you know, I'm seriously praying about this. I'm praying that in this particular area that we would see a greater proportion of prayers answered than we would if we weren't praying prayers specifically about this. I'm dreaming that we will be bringing friends and family to church because we see people set free from depression in our community. I really am praying these things. I want this to happen. We see, don't we, what a hold mental illness can have on people. And we see how big a part of society it is. And I'm really praying, God, would you do something special among us? Would you set people free among us? Would you release people to express all of their emotions as much as they wish to? Reason 3, you may not be someone who displays emotion very much, full stop. That's okay. Doesn't mean you don't feel or that you don't love. Some people are emotional, some aren't. I am. Much to my dismay, I am. I've prayed for years, or in fact, I don't anymore. I prayed for years that God would take my tears away. Please don't make me such a crier, God. I would literally pray. Please just let me just cope with things without being moved to tears. It's quite embarrassing. I'd love to not. Again, my family turn to me occasionally. We're watching TV together and you're not crying, are you, Dad? And I'm like, no, you're crying. I've been exchanging a few messages with Bola recently, who's in Nigeria, and her experience of life in Nigeria is very different to what she might be experiencing here if she were with us. And so one thing that I want to ask is, if you are not an emotionally expressive person, is it because you're not an emotionally expressive person, or is it because you're so shaped by British culture that wouldn't cry or express much emotion unless it's for a wedding, a funeral, or a football match? And may it be true that to be shaped by the culture of God's kingdom and not British culture may make you more emotionally expressive, more willing to make public displays of affection. I don't know whether that's true or not. It's a question I'm posing to you. Remember, God wants you to worship him with your whole mind, body, soul, heart, strength. He wants all of you. He wants absolutely all of you. Don't be afraid to express your love for him with emotion and with affection. Right. Lastly, remember, this is the most light-hearted one, and I'm not looking at anybody. When it comes to the physical act of public displays of affection like Mary, you're just going, do you know what, the thought of getting on my knees or of lying face down fills me with dread. Neil, I will never get up again. If I do that, I will be stuck forever. Maybe standing up for half an hour in a time of worship is alone too much, let alone raising your hands. Maybe that is too much. And there really is, I want you to know this, there really is grace for you in that. And I want to encourage you, if that's the case. I've been quite careful here. I didn't want to say that you may be too old to do this, because it's not necessarily an age thing, is it? But there is grace for you in this. And if you are someone who, yet, you know what, I couldn't kneel down, I can't stand up for half an hour, I can't raise my hands, if that is you, if there is grace for that. It doesn't mean that you're not able to worship Jesus. And I want to say to you as well, if this is you, you can have a massive impact on the rest of the body as you demonstrate the ways that you do show affection and do worship God without it being demonstrated in such a narrow way. And really, the younger people among us, if they, wow, do you know what? They're not worshipping like this. They're not on their knees. They're not eyes. It's not heart, but I can see in their life that they really love Jesus, that their affections are displayed in different ways. Just because they're not doing this, it doesn't mean they don't love Jesus. And I want to encourage you that you could have a really positive impact on us. How am I doing for time? I said I wouldn't be so long. Right. Okay. Right. So that's my 4 reasons why we might struggle to display affection publicly. I've got a very short list now, which I'm going to try and rattle through really quickly, of 5 reasons that you should. 5 reasons that I really want to encourage you to embrace your emotions and to use them in your worship of God and to demonstrate your affections privately, publicly, but to just love Jesus. I'm blown away, God, that you've saved me, and I love you, and I want to tell you that, and I want to tell you that so much. I just want you to know, God, how much I love you. That's what I want to encourage you to do today. So firstly, Jesus is worthy of your affections. That's the first one, isn't it? He's beaten sin and death. How good is he? And we can come to him and we say, God, I'm so grateful. I absolutely adore you that you have saved me. It just blows me away. Every day it blows me away. God, that you've done this for me. Wow. Blows me away. Secondly, when we are brave to publicly express our worship for God, we remind each other that he's worth it. It's not just about you and God. When you do it, I go, wow, I wasn't feeling very much like I wanted to do this today, but when I see Nicholas dancing, man, he's worthy of that. I want to do this too. I want to do this too. This is what I want to see. He's so worth it. So secondly, you empower others to do it. Thirdly, bravely declaring our love for God protects ourselves and others from ever thinking that this faith can be lived out without emotion. Love is not first in emotion, nor is it primarily an emotion, but displaying our affection for God, publicly, privately, just whatever, displaying our affection for God stops us from just growing in knowledge and understanding all mysteries and prophetic powers, but really being loveless, noisy gongs or clanging cymbals. We need to demonstrate our affections for God to save ourselves and others from thinking that you can live a life of devotion and worship of Jesus without ever being moved to the very core of yourself to say, God, I love you. I absolutely love you. I think that's what Mary's example shows us. I am confident that it was because Mary was preparing Jesus for burial that this event was most of all to be remembered, but it was certainly because of the unembarrassed, costly act of worship too. That humble act of worship where there's people there, there's even haters there. Judas says, doesn't he, how could you do this? So there's even people there not impressed with this. She doesn't care. Jesus, you're so worth this. You're so worth this. And Jesus affirms her in that. So brothers and sisters, don't grow cold. Don't harden your heart. In your affections towards him, aim for warmth. Aim for softness of heart and deep gratitude. Fourthly, being warm in our affections to God is an unignorable testimony of our belief in his being alive and of him being good. When we just love Jesus and people see that you love Jesus, they're forced to question what this is all about. If people believe in all sorts of things, don't they? But nothing causes people to come alive or causes lives to change like the gospel. And when people see that, it's compelling. It's compelling. It's compelling in your life when the reality and presence of Jesus stands out and it intrigues people. Earlier this week, I was at the gym, and I've been going to the gym early in the mornings more recently. The car park in the New Addington Leisure Centre has 2 rows of parking on the outside and 2 in the centre. Someone had not put their handbrake on, and a car had rolled from the centre row and hit, it looked like 2 cars on the other side, and it looked like it was mine. Looked like it was mine. I was like, oh. The guy at the gym, they couldn't find the owner. They didn't know who it was. And I looked out the window and went, oh, that's my car. But I went, do you know what? You can't find the owner. Can't hit my car twice. I'm just going to finish my workout. And one of the guys who I talked to quite a lot at the gym came up to me afterwards and said, Neil, I want to pray like you pray, because I can't believe the way you've just responded. You know, I can't believe that you've just been so chilled about the fact that your car's just been banged into. Now, if it sounds like I'm drawing attention to myself, later that day, I was extremely impatient in a different situation. So it wasn't me. I'm not always perfect. But actually, there was something in me which is, because I know God, that it's just a car. It's just a car. Can't hit it twice. I'm going to finish my workout. The owner's not even there. Turned out it wasn't my car. The car next to me, which was parked slightly further back than mine, took the full force of the rolling car, and my car was absolutely fine. But I didn't know that until I got down. Anyway, fifthly, our warmth and affection towards God is a declaration of God's multifaceted wisdom to the spiritual realm. That's what Ephesians 3 tells us, isn't it? When we do what we're doing today, when we sing songs filled with truth, when we hopefully do this, we're declaring something to the spiritual realm, to rulers and authorities and powers. This is God's plan. It's good. This is God's plan. It's good. I talked in the round robin message this week, just again saying one of the things that was so lovely in our sabbatical was just seeing the church. We went to 3 different churches in our sabbatical. We saw the church. And I said, one church, absolutely packed, 400 people, not a spare seat in the whole sanctuary, full live band, amazing church. We were worshipping God there. The next week, I went to Castle Hill, 50 people. They've grown, 50 people. One person leading worship with a guitar. We're still worshipping God. We're still singing truth. We're still enjoying being in His presence. We're still enjoying being together. It was wonderful. You don't need all the lights and bells and whistles. You don't need it. And then lastly, we went to a church in Sutton. About 70 people. Hardly any musicians or singers. They worshipped with a backing track. A backing track. Can you believe it? One singer accompanying a backing track. God was the same. We still enjoyed His presence. We still enjoyed fellowship together. One of the things that I loved, when we were there, we saw a lady getting baptized, and she shared her testimony of how she came across the church by encountering them at the food stop. She had two children, one son probably 4 or 5 years old, one son nearly 2. And she confessed, before I met these people, I was as close to being an alcoholic as I could have been, and I smoked cannabis all day, every day. Jesus has changed my life. Jesus changed her life in a church that worships with a backing track and a single singer. I mean, can you believe that? I can. It was so wonderful. It really was one of my most precious memories. As she got baptized, her son, her older son, he was all over the place. But he's watching her, and in this moment as she's getting baptized, honestly, I mean, I can't do a 4-year-old boy's voice very well, but I can still hear the way he said it. Well done, Mummy. Good job, Mummy. But wow, the change that's happened in this person, in this family's destiny, changed forever, because this woman has encountered Jesus in a community who just want to love God. They're not going, but we've only got one worship leader and a backing track. Can't really advance the kingdom here. They just love God, and they love one another, and God is working among them and doing wonderful things. Guys, this is what I want to give myself to build here. A church who love God deeply, who love one another, who just generously share Jesus everywhere they go. Being publicly affectionate here, now. As I say, when I look around, I see hands, wow, I'm encouraged. Sorry, I wanted to go a whole sermon without saying it, Bernard, but I can't not. When Bernard's running around dancing with flags, I'm encouraged. When Nicholas is dancing, I'm encouraged. I mean, you've seen me occasionally try to bring out the Jubilee two-step and to get you all dancing a bit every now and then. I'm not much of a dancer. I am an emotional person. I'm not much of a dancer. You're more likely to see me going down to my knees and just really, that's the sort of, hands open, hands up. That's more me. But when you display your affections for God, it does these 5 things. It's good for you, it's good for us, it's good for onlookers, and it tells the spiritual realms that God is in control. So don't grow cold. I'm nearly finished. I went over longer than I thought I would. Don't grow cold. Don't harden your heart. In your affections towards God, aim for warmth. Aim to be soft-hearted. Aim to be loving and to be grateful always. And Croydon Jubilee Church, I believe this with all of my heart. If we will do that, and if we will persevere with faith and patience, we will see God continue to move among us, continue to change us, continue to shape us to the culture of his kingdom. If there is any truth that any of us may be shaped by British stiff upper lipness, not doing the Jubilee two-stepness, we will see God move. We really will. We really will. I'm absolutely certain of that. I loved singing these songs this morning. Your name is like honey on my lips. Your spirit like water to my soul. I mean, we mean these words when we sing them, don't we? How good is it to know God? How amazing is it that we have been saved? And we just wish that everyone could know what we know. And one thing that calls people to it, better than an argument, is you really mean this. I can see in your life, I can see in your affections, I can see by the way you talk about God and the way you talk about one another, this has actually changed you. This is real. It's not just something you do on a Sunday. This is a person who has just grabbed hold of you. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for me. That's what I want for us. Shall we sing? And shall I pray? I'm going to pray quickly.